When we compare premium European cars, BMWs are generally the more driver-focused of the lot. But in the case of the previous generation X3, it was a bit of a dud, and that allowed the Q5 to be the more all-rounder. It was a fun-to-drive car. So when the new Q5 came out, we compared it against its class rivals. And then we had a surprise winner, the Volvo XC60. Good to look at, very well kitted, and surprisingly good to drive as well. But there is now a new BMW X3, and that could change everything. Does it? Let's find out. The new X3 may not look remarkable, and that is because of the various elements of the BMW's design theme that have become far too common across their range. Compare it in isolation to the X3 family tree though, and you will agree with me that BMW has finally made the X3 look handsome. The face has a more butt stance, and the enlarged grille, though polarizing, plays a big role to this effect. Look at the X3 from its side and rear three-quarters, and the leaner body and the chiseled lines will attract you further. The lighting elements look elegant and seem to find their roots in BMW's sportier model lines. I would have liked more vibrant color options in the palette if I was buying the X3. But that said, even in white, the X3 manages to look quite athletic, and that should work in its favor. Its German compatriot, the Audi Q5, suffers from the shortcomings of an evolutionary design. While the simplicity continues to work in its favor in certain markets, to me, this design theme seems too long in the tooth now. To its credit, it is a handsome design, and the sharp creases, flared arches, and the upright profiles for the front and rear give it more SUV-like proportions compared to its competitors, and there are many who are sold on that facet alone. But those looking for exclusivity and flair will easily fall for the Volvo XC60. Though it is the longest and the widest car of the trio, the marginally short height and the pinched window line give the XC60 proportions that tilt more towards a crossover body style than SUV. It has simple facial features and subtle lines, but the XC60's stylish and sophisticated lighting elements draw attention away from all the simplicity and give it a premium poise. BMW's cabins are a lesson for other car makers on how to make the cabins, how to make the dashboards more driver-centric. Look at the center console, it's nicely tilted towards the driver, all the controls are ergonomic, they fall easily at hand. The materials used, the way the display is laid out, everything just makes you feel like you're a part of the drivetrain when you are driving enthusiastically. And I think that makes a lot of difference towards contributing to that driving fun. Overall, this has the typical elements of a BMW cabin, but at the same time, it has enough to make it look like the next generation of the car. And that makes it look a lot more different, a lot more evolutionary as compared to the outgoing X3. And that is not only about the design, but also about the equipment. The leather upholstery, soft touch plastics, and polar grain wood elevate the premium feel of the cabin. The rear seats are roomy and comfortable on long distance journeys. The cabin of the Q5, typical Audi in its fit and finish, in the colors used, in the materials used, it's just perfect. It is very hard to find faults with. My only grudge with this cabin is the design, the layout. It just doesn't look novel. It doesn't look new when you compare it to the family of Volkswagen, Skoda and Audi cars that we've come to love over the years. It still feels or looks very much a part of it, which is a good thing for some, but for me, I would have liked something a little more exclusive, something a little more premium. Overall, I think, like I said, I like the overall fit and finish. I like the ergonomics. Every control falls easily at hand. My only little grudge again is you have a wireless charger, but it doesn't like the size of my phone. It just doesn't fit there. And when I close the center armrest, I can't see my phone. I think the BMW does a better job at that. This could have been better. Overall, like I said, impeccable fit and finish in the cabin. Nice and pleasant place to be in. The panoramic roof, like in the X3, offers a nice airy feel inside this cabin, and the bright colors used for the upholstery contribute to that further. The Q5 too has generously large seats, which adds to the overall comfort and has the best air conditioning performance in the class despite the large glass house. The cabin of the Volvo XC60 I think is the best in this comparison. It looks good, it looks very premium, it feels very premium. The kind of materials used, it's quite unique compared to the Q5 or the X3. Now the design, the layout may work for some, may not work for some. It could make a few people feel a little claustrophobic in here because everything nicely wraps around you. The dashboard is slightly higher, the colors used are quite dark, and that could make for a slightly more cozy feeling than you would like. I personally like it quite a bit, but despite having a panoramic roof, the cabin doesn't feel as airy as what you would feel in the Q5 or in the X3. But the fit and finish is just perfect. Like I said, it feels more premium, it feels like it's from a car a segment higher, and that certainly works in the XC60's favor. Like its exterior design, even the cabin of the XC60 has a premium edge over its rivals. Its fine attention to detail and longer list of features helps it score more points than the Germans. But we are focusing on the driving fun, and before we put power down to the road, let us acknowledge the safety technologies that these cars come with. Apart from traction control, anti-lock brakes, hill assist and airbags on all sides and corners, which are common on all the three cars, the XC60 trumps the X3 and the Q5 with radar-based technologies that assist the driver in evasive braking or steering maneuvers, in autonomously maintaining the lane, or by adopting the cruise control as per the behavior of the vehicles around. Let's now get down to driving these cars. I love the visibility that you get from the driver's seat. I love those bulges on the bonnet as well. And the A-pillar, despite having this huge speaker setup on there, it doesn't really feel all that intrusive. The BMW X3's trump card is the ride and handling department. The X3 now employs lighter suspension components that comprise of coil springs and adaptive dampers. The car sets new benchmarks for the segment by maintaining a flat ride through corners and boasting of easier turn-ins. The new X3 is about 55 kilos lighter than the outgoing car depending on the variant you choose, and that weight loss shows in the way it handles around the bends. The turn-ins are much quicker now, and that is also complemented by a very finely tuned steering setup which weighs up nicely at highway speeds and around the twisties, and in the city it remains quite conveniently light. I was a bit wary of the braking on the previous generation X3, but the new one sorts it out nicely. The feel of the brake pedal is nice and progressive. The braking, the bite is confident, it's very predictable and confidence inspiring in that sense. And even the gearbox feels more attentive now for engine braking. The X-Drive system is more rear biased now. That, along with the electronic differential, give this car its impressive cornering manners. There's no hint of understeer even when pushing the car hard. The trademark Communicative Bmw Steering is the icing on the cake. The sport mode stiffens things up, and how. The car will start skipping and jumping and tracking over imperfections in the road. But the moment you hit the twisties, oh my god, you get this flat ride through the corners. In fact, the dynamics are so good that they make the drivetrain feel a little slow. The drivetrain isn't lethargic, it isn't slow, but the dynamics, oh my god, they're so good. It starts making you beg for more power in this car. The X-Drive X30D, yes please. The X-Drive M40i, oh my god, yes please. BMW, you need to bring that car to India. The new X3 is powered by BMW's trusty B47 2-litre 4-cylinder diesel engine. I love the refinement of this new engine, but in the X3, it just feels so much better. Even past the 4000 RPM range, you do not get that typical gravelly note that you associate with diesel engines. It feels so much more refined. Of course, it's also around this rev range, the top end of the rev range, that the engine starts feeling a little out of breath. But the mid-range pull, the low-end pull, it's quite strong. And that ensures that drivability in the city is no problem at all. And around the twisties, the X3 becomes a lot of fun. The weakness of BMW's 2-litre oiler is highlighted further when you experience what the Q5 similarly spec TDI engine can manage, which is surprising considering that the Q5 is the heaviest car of this test. The engine of the Audi Q5, it isn't the most powerful of this test, but it is easily the most eager of this test, and that makes for a very engaging drive. The magic lies in the 7-speed DSG transmission and the grip that comes from the finely tuned Quattro all-wheel drive system. The transmission changes character significantly as you cycle through the driving modes. This drivetrain with the X3's handling package would be the ideal driver's car for the segment. The Audi Q5 had left my colleagues impressed when we reviewed the car earlier this year. But drive it behind the new X3 and you immediately notice that it is visually and practically squishier compared to its compatriot. The flip side is a marginally comfier ride than the Bmw. The Q5 also gets the Quattro all-wheel drive, which gives it impressive grip, but it feels slightly more understeery when you compare it to the rear bias dynamics of the X3. The engaging driving dynamics of the Q5 are marred to an extent by the overly assisted steering. When you hop into this car from the X3, this one feels a little too artificial, a bit too light for my liking. That sort of kills the fun a bit. Come to terms with that steering and the Q5 is quite impressive to drive. It is also one of the easiest cars to drive in this lot and has the most progressive braking feel in this test compared to the relatively sharper brakes of the X3 or the spongy braking feel of the XC60. Speaking of the understeer though, the XC60 displays this characteristic the most, especially when pushing the car around tight bends. The grip from the Haldex all-wheel drive in this regard is more safety biased than performance. The AWD systems on all the three cars handle mild off-road scenarios like dirt, sand or snowy paths, rocky trails and shallow water crossings quite well. The XC60 edges ahead though with its ability to lift the body by 40mm to crawl over bumpier surface. This is courtesy of the air suspension, which may not impart racetrack-ready dynamics but makes the XC60 the comfiest ride of this test. The definition of driving fun can be different for different people. It may not always be about being on the edge of the power or attacking every corner as it comes. Some like it laid back. They want the drivetrain to be responsive but not aggressive. And if you are that kind of a person, then probably the Volvo XC60 could be the car for you. It has the most powerful engine of this test, but it doesn't overwhelm the driver in any way. That is pretty much the character of the XC60's package too. Laid back and to the point. If that is what you seek, the Volvo XC60 could be the car for you. In fact, let us sum it all up. Like our previous test with the luxury compact crossovers, this one too comes to a very close finish with hardly a point separating the contenders. All things considered, the Volvo XC60 still remains the ideal crossover to buy in this category. It has all the bells and whistles that you expect from a premium car of today, has a desirable design, and is priced very competitively for the kind of kit that it offers. The X3 ties with the Q5 as both the cars fall short of the XC60 by only a point. But to answer the bigger question that we started this test with, the BMW X3 is the ideal driver's car in this segment now, period. It is far superior than the other two in terms of driving dynamics and puts power down to the road in a manner that will excite the enthusiast in you. But it does it all so well that a sprightlier engine and a bit more kit is all that it needs now to be the crossover of choice in this segment. Get the xDrive 30D already, BMW.